The interviewer is Margaret Dawson. You tell me your full name, please.
Diana Madeline Cullen.
And what was your maiden name?
Diana Madeline Adams.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Hobart on the 11th of February 1923.
And did you spend most of your childhood in that area?
Yes.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had 2 sisters and 1 brother that died.
Now, your schooling, whereabouts did you attend school?
In Hobart, I went to a French school till I was 12, where I only learnt French. That was about all. Didn't do any maths or anything till I was 12.
And your high school years?
In Hobart, I went to a school called FAHN, F-A-H-A-N.
And did you do further education after secondary school?
Yes, I did a physiotherapy at Melbourne University and half a Bachelor of Arts degree.
Now, how did you meet your husband?
At the university.
Right, and could you tell me his full name?
Kevin John Cullen.
And what was he studying at university?
He was studying medicine.
Where and when were you married?
We were married in Hobart in 1946. Yes, 46.
And where did you go to live then?
We lived there in Hobart for a year, and then we came over to Busselton because the Medical Association had asked for another doctor than Dr. Yates to come here. And Kev's father, who lived in Bunbury at the time, he was a doctor also, he wrote to Kev and said, there's a great need down here, so we came to Busselton.
And do you know what year that would have been?
Kev came in 47 or 48, 47 it must have been.
And were all your children born in Busselton?
And no, Rick was born in Tasmania.
So how many children do you have altogether?
6.
And when did you or Dr. Cullen first become interested in growing grapes for wine?
About 1956, but 66 certainly. That was when in 65 John Gladstone wrote his thesis on the area as being one of the 3 best areas in the world according to climate and terroir for growing grapes. And he said, you're mad growing cattle and sheep, why don't you grow grapes? So that was why we did.
So you already had the property at the time?
Yes.
Now, who else was growing grapes in this area at that time?
Well, no one. There were probably a few Italians who had, the odd plot for making their own wine, I would imagine. But the only other people who planted in 66 were ourselves and Bill and Joy Minchin. We planted trial plots.
So who would have come soon after you?
Well, Tom Cullity planted in 67, and then Bill Pannell in 69. They both made wine before us because our original planting was pulled out. So.
And where was that here?
No, that was on Juniper's place, just where Wright's is now.
What was the influence of Dr. John Gladstone on you?
Well, that was enormous because it was the first area in Australia that was planted on scientific grounds. And he said the best grapes for this area at the time were the Bordeaux varieties, which is Cabernet and Merlot, and Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon. And he's been proved very right, really. Although Chardonnay's done very well down here.
Bill Minchin's trial plot that he had, did that influence you at all to go ahead?
Well, we both planted at the same time, the same year.
Now, what was your acreage of when you first planted here?
Only an acre in the first planting. Then we planted in 71 here, and we planted 17 acres originally.
And what type of farming had been on this property before that?
Dairy farming.
And what was the natural vegetation of this area?
It was nearly all red gum, on this particular red gum and jarrah. Actually, Bill Jamieson had a very big influence. He was the viticultural, not expert, but the viticultural officer at the Department of Agriculture, and he told us to plant on this very granity soil as being the best, which it quite definitely is. It's very interesting, really. He went right over the farm, thought this was the best area, and the areas where we get our top wines from are all in the very granity soil, not the rich loam and things. So where the red gums are, that's all the best grapes come from. Interesting.
Apart from Bill Jamieson, was the Agriculture Department, did they have any other expertise in
No,
wine
they didn't.
growing?
He did everything. He was wonderful. He came down in the weekends and his time off and helped us all and advised us. He's never been given enough praise for it, really. It's all been John Gladstone because he picked the area, but Bill was the one who followed it up. I mean, he was terribly busy. He used to judge the whole show on his own, about the 1,000 wines and be rushing everywhere, and had a trial planting in Mount Barker. That was interesting because they originally brought out actually Court Senior was quite a lot of foresight. He could see that the Swan was going to become urbanised, so he got out this Professor Olmo from America, who was a leading expert, and he got him out to advise on other areas. This was in about before John Gladstone anyway, in the 50s, late 50s. And on the strength of that, he said Mount Barker and Franklin River. But actually he never came here because Tom, what was his name, Baron Hay, who was the head of the agriculture department then, had a dinner in Perth. Instead of bringing him over here, he took him back to Perth from Mount Barker. So he never actually came here. So it was quite interesting, really. And then it took Bill a long time to persuade the government to allow him to set up a trial plot in Mount Barker, so on Franklin River. It's quite interesting, really, because Bill Jamieson really had an enormous influence that he hasn't been given credit for.
So if you needed any advice, he was the man you would have gone to?
Yes, he did everything.
Now, did you have to do much soil preparation before you planted?
Well, we didn't do as much as we should have because we didn't know then. We should have ripped it. And there weren't the bulldozers and things with the deep rippers. When we planted the second lot in 76, we had it all ripped then. But we would have done much better to have ripped it, but it was very primitively done, really.
Did you add any fertilisers to your soil then?
Very little. Really, we've always tried to be as organic as we can, actually.
So your first planting was 17 acres, apart from your first one?
Yes.
And what varieties were they?
They were Cabernet and Riesling, which were the only ones we could get then.
So, and they were cuttings?
Yes.
And where did you get them?
From the Swan
cuttings?
Research Station.
And who planted them?
Myself and Geraldine Merchant. We planted most of them, really. And Kevin did a bit, but not as much, because he was busy with his practice and things.
Now, who looked after the grapes or managed them once they were in?
First of all, we had someone called Murray and Marjorie Neves. They helped us. We supervised it mostly ourselves, but we had the most awful things happen to us, such as tying up the grapes in the second year with string that had been next door to some 2,4-D ester in Dalgetty's shed. We thought the farmers were spraying, so we got a thing banning all spraying with 2,4-D ester, and then we tied them all up again, and they still went down like this, but we were using the same string. And finally we traced it back to the fact that Dalgetty's had stored it next to 2,4-D ester. So we got new string.
And what was the attitude of the local farmers when you planted?
Hilarious. They thought we were quite mad. It's dairy country, farming country. It'll never do any good. But anyway, it's interesting now because such a lot of them are all turning to grapes too.
Now, did you irrigate at all?
No, we don't believe in irrigation.
You don't irrigate
No.
now?
We've done trials with it. We've got a little trial over on our new vineyard over there, but the grape that you get from dry farming is very much more concentrated, and you don't get as much grape, but you get more concentrated, better flavours, and we're sort of only trying to make quality wine. We're not trying to get huge or greedy about money and things. I mean, we get 50 inches of rain here, and there's a clay base. I can't see really why, once they get their roots done, it's harder to get them going. It takes much longer, 5 or 6 years really, instead of 2 or 3. But the quality, as far as I'm concerned, is quite different. We've bought grapes at odd times from irrigated places, and we put them in our second layer of wines.
Was your initial outlay high as it is now?
No, I've forgotten what we paid. I think about $100 an acre. We might have been £100. Yes, it was £100 in 56 an acre.
So what type of posts did you use for your...
We used Jarrah, which we're having to pull out now, actually. because they're all rotting at the bottom from the water, and redo.
But they've been in quite a long time.
Yes, they have. They've been in 26 years. So.
And what type of trellising?
We had an old-fashioned, what's called trellis. You have a small trellis on the bottom with 2 wires, a small thing on, and then you have a wider one on the top. But that, my daughter, when she came down here, she...
So was that your original trellising?
Yes, that was the original trellising. But that shaded, that was what they had in the Swan, but actually it wasn't suitable for down here because it's quite a different climate. And you need to expose the grapes, whereas the Swan needed to cover them up because it was too hot. So we've gradually had to change all that. We've still got a few of the old ones. She can't afford to do it all at once. We do a bit each year.
So Vanya, did she see that when she was at college, the different types?
Yeah, I think from travelling round to different areas, really, in New Zealand in particular, it was Richard Smart and people, they all had the open trellises, or the Scott Henry that sort of one goes up and one goes down, and it exposes all the grapes. And we got a much better quality. Vanya made wine from the original trellis and the other trellis and the new trellis, and it was much better quality.
So the sun's able to get onto the grapes?
Yes, and you definitely need that down here.
And would that also help to cut down on botrytis?
We very seldom have botrytis. We're always trying to encourage it so we can make a Sauterne style. But we got a bit this year in our Riesling, but we haven't had any since 94. Before that, since 1990. You only get it sometimes, and you get it very late in the season when you've picked most of your other grapes.
A lot of people seem to have it. Do you think there's anything to do with watering, perhaps?
I'm not sure. It could be. I hadn't thought of that. But a lot of people think they've got it, but in actual fact it's not. It's a thing called sclerotinia. It usually cures itself when you get a burst of sunshine. A lot of people around here I know sprayed madly thinking they were getting botrytis. We had the same thing, but I've seen it for so many years. It cleaned itself up as soon as you get sun. So I don't know whether they did or not, but I doubt it. We don't get much botrytis down here.
So now what were some of your early problems? Did you have any soil deficiencies?
We didn't initially. That's come afterwards. You get a bit out of balance with putting on fertilisers if you're not very careful. You've got to be careful. Well, I think grapes like soils that are deficient a bit. I'm always thinking of the grape that makes the wine. And the grape that makes the wine is different from the grape table grapes.
It's the end product.
Yes, but they don't need rich fertilizer. If you've got a mouse or something, you've got a few of those around. You don't need highly fertilised things to have good wine.
And what about the birds?
Yes, the birds are a problem whenever the Marri doesn't blossom.
And they were early as well?
Yes, in 77 we picked terribly early because they were just wrecking the vines, really. They're quite bad. When the Marri's good, we don't have any trouble. This year we had none. It's interesting, really.
What about weeds?
Yes, weeds are a problem, particularly in the early years. It doesn't matter so much when they get older. There's a new thing out now where you can go along with hot water and get rid of them with that, which is be good. We try not to spray too much if we can. We're very anti-sprays. Hay along all the roots and things like that, which is very good.
It's a mulch, isn't it?
But it's very expensive.
And what about hail? Have you had very much hail?
Yes, we do get hail quite often. This year it devastated our Chardonnay, actually. We only got 5 tons off 17 acres. We normally get about 30. But that's bad.
And you don't have any control over that?
No. And you get and when it's very windy in September, this year we had very strong winds, 120 kilometres in September, when the little grapes were about that big with little flowerlets. That devastated our whites, so we really had a bad year for whites this year. I think most people down here are down on their whites this year. Reds are all right, but you're very influenced by the seasons.
And what about kangaroos? Were they a problem early?
They are still a bit of a problem. I know Woodlands has an awful problem. They've got a kangaroo-proof fence around theirs. They eat the bottom ends of the rows, and the bottom row of the vines. They come in, they suck the bottom off them, and they take a bit up there too. Depends on the season. If they're hungry, they'll come in.
Now, were the other growers, once you got established and other people were growing, were they helpful to one another in exchanging ideas or guarded?
Oh yes, it's a very good area like that. Very good. You know, we have things like pre-tastings before people bottle their wine of that season's wines, and we bring them all blind, and all the winemakers say number 4's got H2S or number 3's volatile or whatever, and then that person, sometimes they say, oh, I'm number 3, but mostly they can take it home and rectify it, which is I don't think it's done anywhere else that I know of.
So
but no, people, we all helped each other really.
Well, that's very good for the area as a whole, isn't it?
It's terribly important to always keep the word Margaret River, you know, before you think of Cullens or before you think of anywhere else, and then Western Australia and then Australia. I mean, I don't believe all areas are different. I'm a very strong believer in cooperation, really, because it's a strength to everyone that way.
So were you one of the people behind getting the Margaret River name established for the region?
Yes, my husband was. We actually wanted to be called a different name, but we were outvoted. Doesn't matter now, it's Margaret River and you couldn't possibly change it. But Kev did start the regional certification in 79, which was very strict in those days. You had to have your wines passed and tested and pulled out of what you'd bottled and tested by the department for analysis and for whether it was of a good quality or not. It was not easy to get it. Now you just have the regional name if you're in a certain region, which in a way is a bit of a pity.
Because you do get the not so good as well as the good.
It would have been much better if they'd stuck to that, but people got very upset, without mentioning any names, when their wines were knocked back. So that was why it fell through, really.
Now, what year was your first vintage?
74.
Right, and what was the tonnage or the...
Oh, it was about 2 barrels we got from it. It was dreadful wine. I hope no one's got any left. It was all right when we made it, but I think we didn't bottle it very well.
And what was that?
Cabernet.
Cabernet. And who picked it?
We did, in the family.
And who made the first wine?
Kev.
How did he find out about making wine?
Well, his grandfather actually had a vineyard in Bunbury in the 1890s. He used to make port and send to the goldfields because they didn't have water or something. But I mean, he's had a scientific background, so, you know, we went all around Australia sort of to different wineries, and we've been overseas a lot to different places. We've been to seminars and all those sort of things, really.
So his grandfather, was it his grandfather Cullen?
Clark.
And your barrels, were they oak?
Yes.
And where did they come from?
Oh, they all come from France.
And a costly item.
Yes, they're very costly actually. Much more now than they were then. Oh, I suppose to be the same proportion, really.
So the quality is very important.
Yes.
Of the oak?
Yes, terribly important. It takes a long time to find out about which is the best ones. The trouble is you have to order it in August. You don't know how much you're going to get in way of grape, and you don't know what sort of grape the grape's going to be like in August. So it's very hard to order the ideal oak for the wine that you're going to make. It's one of the great disadvantages. The French have a great advantage there because they don't, but we have to order usually in September at the latest to be able to get the barrels here in time.
So the distance is a bit of a disadvantage in that
Yes,
way.
we've gone through every oak maker, I think, now.
And the bottles for your first vintage, where did they come from?
ACI.
Is that the same place as you get them now?
Yeah, no, we get quite a lot from overseas now too, because ACI have a limited range.
And what about the corks and capsules?
They all come from Spain and Portugal.
And what about at first?
Pardon?
What about your at first?
No, they've always come from there, yes.
Now your first label, who designed that?
Kevin I think. It's terrible. Just very plain.
And you changed your label, didn't you, later?
Yes, we changed to a picture of the this old winery as it was then.
And who designed that one?
I can't really remember that.
Was
It
it
might have
Ashley?
been Label World, I'm not
Wasn't
sure.
Ashley Jones, was it?
No, Ashley did our new one.
Oh,
in
you've had a
84.
third one, have you?
Had a third one, yes. We had one in between the original, which was just a band, and one, we had a picture of the local winery, which someone took. I think Label World sort of put it all together. They've been our labellers, you know, we've got labels from them ever since we started, really.
And so your present label, that was Ashley Jones?
Yes, he designed, couldn't stand our labels anymore, so let me design a decent label. And I said, well, I'd like something with an oak leaf and acorn for the wines we have in oak, so people will know their age. And he came up with really a very nice label, actually.
So he was an art, or he is an artist?
Yes, he is. Because he's got paintings in all sorts of the Australian National Gallery and Japanese National Gallery and all over the world. He doesn't have enough time to paint, which is a tragedy, really, because he's very artistic.
Now, how did you label your bottles first?
By hand.
No machine?
No. Then we had a primitive machine. Now we have a quite sophisticated machine. And sometimes we get in Mike Davies to do a run for us, bigger ones.
Now, do you remember what the price of your first bottle?
$2.50.
And that was your red, that was your Cabernet?
Yes, that was our Cabernet.
Cabernet Sauvignon?
Yes.
Now, when was the winery built?
Well, that winery there we built in 74. But we didn't build it, it was an old groupie house. We just filled in stone all around the outside where they had the veranda. It was a groupie house, and then it was a shearing shed. We used it for a shearing shed. Then we turned it into a winery. We used to make the wine and sell the wine and do everything just in that building.
And now that's like the sales area?
Yes, it is really,
and
with bits tacked on it here and there.
And your modern
big
winery?
winery was built in 78, and that was when we had Bruce Allen. Bruce Allen from down the road, who has a degree in agricultural science. There weren't any enologists available in those days. You know, no one ever wanted to come to Western Australia. The last place in the world, they wanted to come Margaret River. Now they all want to come there, come here. But we didn't. But he had a degree in agricultural science, Bruce, and he made wine with Kevin's help from 76 to 78. And then we had Mark Peterkin did a vintage for us for 6 weeks in 79 and 80, which I helped him. And then I did the wine after that till 89 when Vanya took over.
So where did you learn your winemaking skills?
From trial and error, my dear.
Well, it's a very good trial and error.
Reading books and going to seminars and travelling and listening to people. And that's the thing, really, listening. So we threw out quite a few of our early wines. Mm.
Oh, well, you had.
But on the other hand, our 1977 Riesling got the first trophy for the area at the Canberra show, which was quite interesting because they always say this area can't grow Riesling. I think it can. I think we can make some beautiful Rieslings here, but it's just that Mount Barker's got the name for having really good Riesling. But anyway, that one got the trophy, so that was good.
So now you're updating all your cellar area and you're expanding the restaurant here.
Yeah, we're not really expanding it, we're making it, we'll have much the same things really, but we have got 2 French chefs who are going to put extra dishes on. But we had to expand it because I don't know how the girls managed last year in the small kitchen. They were just wonderful. You know, there's so many people coming down all the time. Tremendous number of people from overseas, and I'd say we have at least someone from overseas every day of the week, often a whole group of them, you know, German tourists and Japanese tourists and buses. I hate.
So you export to Germany and Japan?
Yes,
and
we export to the UK, Canada, America, Germany, France, Sweden, Denmark, Austria.
Any of the Asian countries?
Yes, we export to Japan, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand, Singapore. Did I say Indonesia? Get muddled with what I've said.
That's a very big export area, isn't it?
Yes, well, we send a small amount everywhere. We allocate each year all our wine, so much to each of the states, and then so much to the cellar sales. This year we ran out of cellar sales. Then we allocate to each country. It might be 50 or 100 cases of Cabernet, or not very large amounts, just enough which promotes the area. We've done all our exporting from people who've come into the winery. We've never chased exporting at all. We go round, or Vanya's going round once a year to Europe, or Shelley went up to Singapore for us this year, and Thailand. And we go round to support the ones we have, once a year usually. But we're not looking for more. There's people all the time wanting, to import. China and places. A bit suspicious of China.
So when did you actually start cellar sales from here?
76.
And what about, did you serve light lunches? Did that come later?
Yes, it was a bit later because there was so many people coming round. There was no food whatsoever, none. So Shell started, let me think, before she had Nick, must have been about 13 or 14 years ago, I think, just having cheese platters and homemade pasties and soup so that people wouldn't drink too much without having a bit of food. They had somewhere and have coffee and tea and things, and scones and things then. So it was very successful. Now there's a restaurant with practically every winery, really.
Certainly
yes.
Changed the whole area, hasn't it?
Yes.
The restaurants springing up.
Well, it's amazing how wine has altered the area, because it was such a poverty-stricken area. Economically, it's made an enormous difference. And there's cheese factories and
tourism,
art galleries and all sorts of things that really the wine's brought, really, because it's created the demand for and tourists come down, so there's people think they'll set up this, that, and all the tours and things, the local tours.
And all the crafts, isn't it? It's wonderful.
So it's amazing what it's done for the area, really. It really is wine, to be quite truthful, that's really stimulated it. I mean, I know there's the surf and all that, but that hasn't stimulated things like art and craft and restaurants and cheese factories and things. That's all come really from wine, and all the international people really come for the wine. I think something like 90% of, some very large proportion of people who were asked said they'd come here primarily because of the wine, tourists. So.
Now, when did you build your house on the farm here?
Oh dear, 22 years ago. When was that?
So
76. 76, yes. When Vanya went to boarding school. I used to come down all the time before that, and then Kev had to go in.
So Dr. Cullen continued practising
yes.
his medicine all
yes.
this time. And he was responsible for that wonderful Busselton Health Survey getting going?
Yes, he was. He's a wonderful person, really. I miss him a lot. No one to boss me round now.
Now, what year was it that you increased your plantings?
76.
Right, and what varieties did you put in then?
We would have planted them before, but we couldn't get them. And it takes a long time. It takes 5 years. The West Australian government's got a very strict quarantine system in, which is frightfully good, really, because we're so disease-free here. We don't have phylloxera or downy mildew or anything, so that's really a tribute to the agricultural department, really. So we couldn't get till 76 the varieties we wanted, which were Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Pinot, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, and Pinot Chardonnay. We couldn't get those.
So they were all fairly new varieties to the state.
Western
then.
Australia.
Yes.
They did have some Semillon in the Swan, and they also had some Chardonnay at Moondar Brook, but people didn't realise it was Chardonnay, I think. Or they hadn't done the cuttings properly or something. I can't remember the reason. But Bill Pannell planted some Semillon before we did, so I can't remember when he planted, but...
And what, they were cuttings as well, weren't they?
Yes, they were all cuttings, because the cuttings are, they're good, really. Now they all have rooted cuttings and ones that are on rootstock.
So where did they come from, those?
They came from the Swan Research Station.
What acreage was that when you next
That
sold?
brought it up to about, let me think, close to 50 acres. But we put in a bit more since then. Sorry, I'm dreadful with figures. I can never remember. But I think it was pretty close to 50 acres.
So apart from your seller's sales, when did you start going further afield, like to bottle shops or other places?
It must have been about 77, 78, I think.
Once your production increased and you had the volume?
Yes, and people sort of came down and tasted and said, oh, well, take 5 cases of that or something. And then the children who were at university, or some of them were at university then, they took them round to odd stores for us, just try and interest them. It was very hard initially, and people thought something coming from down here wouldn't be any good.
And really, originally, there weren't really a lot of bottle shops, were there?
Oh, there were quite a few, yes. Nothing like now, but there were quite a lot. There was Coppins and Liberty Liquors, and there were quite a few, Waratah Wine Men, Hermitage.
So apart from your family, did you have any other marketing, director?
No, not till we got much bigger. We had then got John Jens, who was with Kaon and Tucker, I think, and he did our wholesaling. And we sold a bit over in Victoria to a chap who's had our wine there forever and ever. He took some, and that must have been about 1977 too. He tasted it and liked it, and he promoted it a lot there. And in Sydney the same thing. In Queensland, I can't remember exactly when but it was fairly early really. But it's always been from people coming to taste rather than us pushing it really.
It sold itself.
Yes, it has really, because they like the wine or something. I don't know.
Now, when you made your first vintage, 91 was it?
81.
81.
Yeah.
And
I did help with all the other vintages really, because Kev wasn't here much. He used to do the analysis and things like that. I did a lot of the physical side of it.
So you were the first woman winemaker to win a trophy at the Perth Royal, weren't you?
Yes, that's right, for what that's worth.
Very good. Now, Vanya is now the winemaker, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
And she's learnt from you as well as going to college.
Well, she did a science degree at UWA first, and music also, and she went over to Adelaide to finish off her music degree, and then she suddenly decided that she'd do the Roseworthy postgraduate course. So we were delighted, as she's the youngest. Nobody else, they only like to drink it, the rest of them. Except Shell, but Shell had got married and all these things.
She married Mike Peterkin.
Yes.
So Shelley's remained attached to your winery, though.
Oh, yes, she is. Yes, she does a lot of promotion for us and a lot of things. Mike likes to be on his own, I think, with his winery. She helps him with promotions too. When she's promoting ours, often she promotes his as well. But she does. All the family actually own the vineyard and winery, and so she has an interest in it, really.
So Vanya is also a wine judge, isn't she?
Yes, she's done a lot of judging, actually. She judged all around the world, just about. She's judged in South Africa and London a lot of times at the International Wine Show. In Hong Kong, she was up at Hong Kong recently, doing the Winnipeg International Wine Show, and every major wine show in Australia she's judges. She still judges. She's very good, but it's very good for us because she learns a lot about wine styles, although wines that are in shows are not necessarily, they're very more upfront. It's the nose. When you've got 100 wines to judge, it's the nose that stands out. But she has learnt an awful lot, but she's got a very good palate, a very discerning palate, much better than I have. I smoke, you see.
Cullen's Winery, you've won a lot of awards, haven't you? What would have given you which ones to you are the most important, or the ones that have given you most pleasure, do you think?
No, really. I think actually it's more important. I believe in taste rather than in show medals. We don't talk about them. We don't enter in Australian wine shows at all now, because Varna's judging. But our agents put them in overseas. We've done quite well overseas. Our 84, for example, was our 84 Cabernet Merlot. They had a blind tasting of all the top Cabernets in the world in London, of 10-year-old Cabernets, 2 or 3 years ago. And ours came top with Penfolds Grange, above all the those, the Chateau this and Chateau Lafite and Mouton. But they had a bad year in 94. But nevertheless, that sort of thing, that was very important. And our 95 Cabernet got runner-up for the best trophy in Hong Kong, which the man put in Hong Kong, which Varna didn't judge, but that was runner-up for the best wine of the show. So the odd places they do well, but I still believe taste's the important thing.
So would your Cabernet Merlot, did you have Cabernet Merlot Reserve that was very good?
Yes, that's actually this year we haven't made a reserve because all the material is really reserve quality, and we probably won't in 96 either. We've got the same thing there where the wine, you can't pick out specific barrels that are better than the others. Varna's been right through them, and she just thinks it's silly. And as we've got a huge demand, it's probably much better to make just one wine, really. But it's very good, the 95. It is really all very reserved. 94, there was quite a bit of difference. And that was the one that had a lot of... The 88 did quite well too. But, we may make another one. It just depends, really.
So your Chardonnay is a very good one. It's very good.
You're in words, making me embarrassed.
Well,
it is good, actually. Yes, it is a good Chardonnay. This one, we've just bottled one this year. It's very nice. Do you like Chardonnay? Mm.
When did blending? Do you do blending at all? Because there seems to be a lot of blending now.
Yes, we do. We have a classic dry white, which is our second label, and a velvet red, which is our second red label. The material we don't think is good enough to put into our top lines. We blend into a classic red or classic white. We also blend a Sauvignon Blanc Semillon, which has been our reserve white, which has been our best white wine probably. I think it's a more elegant wine than the Chardonnay in many ways. But that's picked from the best barrels of the Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. We're just about to release this year's. And then we make sweet wines. This year we're not making... we'll make a sweet Riesling this year. We haven't got enough to make a Blanc de Noir or a late harvest Cabernet, which will be people like, so it's a pity, but never mind.
Can't make them all.
Well, we can't because we haven't got the grapes.
Now, the Margaret River Wine Association, that's been going for quite a while, hasn't it?
Yes, a long time. I couldn't tell you when. You'd have to ask them. I can't remember.
And
I was president of it for a while in the early days. I think David Gregg and myself and all the locals took turns because there weren't many of us. David Honan was secretary. He's very good to work with. I enjoyed those few years.
And that's a very important body to the wine industry.
Yes, it is. It's getting a little bit unwieldy now in a way. It's getting so large. It's terribly important. The younger people are coming in. That's been one of the very good things at lifting the area, really, is all the young, well-qualified winemakers coming in. David Gregg and myself and Kev and Tom Cullity and Bill Pennell, we weren't any of us trained initially. And then when Lewin started up, they had... And David Honan only did a 6 weeks course in winemaking in Fresno or somewhere. None of us were well trained, and now we've got a really good lot of young, well-trained winemakers. And I think the standard will lift, as long as they're not pushed to commercialism too much. Concentrate on quality. It's terribly important for the area to keep the idea of quality all the time, really.
Now, going to pruning, do you mechanical prune now? Or
no, we hand prune and hand pick. So we've got control of our grapes.
Because mechanical pruning, do you think it damages the vines?
It's not too bad. We tried an experimental row one year, but you still have to go around after and clean it all up. It just goes along and slashes the vines. I don't think it made that much difference really to the quality, but certainly it didn't help the vines, I don't think. But I mean, it'll have to go that way. This is a sad thing because of the economics, really.
Because a lot of them now are being the new ones are being set up so
Yeah.
they can have it, aren't
Yeah.
they?
And they're also being all set up for mechanical harvesting. There's a lot of evidence showing that mechanical harvesting you get a lot more phenolics because all the trees, the leaves and snails and everything else go in, but particularly leaves and stalks. And you have to put a lot of sulphur in, and we're very anti. We don't use sulphur at all till after we finish, till before we, when it's finished fermenting. We don't put any into the crush or anything. We chill our grapes instead when we pick them.
So how many permanent workers have you got in your business?
Comes and goes. 2 have just gone off to Sweden for a long service leave. We have about 8 to 10. There's nearly always someone on holidays. There's probably 10 really. We have a lot more during picking and pruning.
Now, the Mount Barker and the Pemberton areas are now going ahead as well.
Mm-hmm. Mount Barker's been there for as long as we have, actually.
What do you think of bringing wines in and blending from other areas?
Well, you can't do that, and you can do it up to 15%. You can have 15% of another area in your wine, but you can't have more. And you can if you write it all on the back. I think it's best to keep the areas individualistic, really. That's the interest for people, is going round and having different tastes and things. That's just my opinion.
I'm thinking they're getting Margaret River wine.
A lot of them, like Evans and Tate, have, they have blends from everywhere. But I think it's nice to keep things regional. That's of interest, particularly from a tourist point of view. And they're very different. Pemberton and Manjimup have such very thick, rich soils, whereas the soils at this side are very denuded soils, really. And they have very vigorous growth that they are learning to keep down, but terribly vigorous and very much bigger crops. And I think most of them irrigate too. I've been there for a while. The interesting one there will be Bill Pannell's vineyard that he's set up, because he's got this rocky soil. It's the only one I've seen down there, and he's not irrigating. It's the only one I've seen that's not irrigating, actually. So he'll probably make the best wines from down that way, I would think.
The quality wines.
Yes. Be very interested to try them, really.
Now, what impact has the wine tax had on the industry?
What impact? Well, it's made it very hard in the sense that you're always doing figures and, bookwork and things like that. I used to be able to, in 1982, I used to be able to supervise the vineyard, make the wine, sell the wine, do all the bookwork, or just about, kept the export, and go off for a month's holiday. Now I can't get away for 2 days. I'm just always filling in forms for the government. I mean, it's absurd. The census things, the tax things, you've got to enter every day how many bottles you sell. Behind the bar, they have to mark down every bottle.
You take a percentage, don't
Yes.
Yes.
But, apart from the money side of it,
it's the time factor.
It's the time. It's absolutely idiotic. I'm always filling in forms. And the other thing is that really infuriates me is that all your employees are treated like children. You do all their taxes for them, take all their taxes out, pay their superannuation. They're all adults. It's undignified. Apart from the time wasting, I think it's insulting to people.
And the wine tax would also increase your price, wouldn't it? Have to increase prices?
Oh yes, you have to add it on. You couldn't survive if you didn't.
Well, even just cellar sales would be a big costly item too.
Well, it's 26%, so it's from $100 to $126.
Now, the impact of tourism, very good, but also it can cause problems, can't they, with the residential and the chalets going near vineyards and things like that?
Yes, well, I believe very strongly that they shouldn't have chalets and things in vineyards at all, within 500 metres at least, because, or more than that, because my house is up there, which is about more than 500 metres from over there, and when they're picking with the harvester all through the night, I can't sleep, even with all the windows and doors shut. Now, people have to pick with harvesters, and if you get chalets and things right in the middle of a vineyard, it's crazy. Absolute madness, apart from all the sprays, and likely to be everybody's litigating everybody these days. But I mean, I think this, they could have group places way away. They don't have to have it near vineyards at all.
It becomes a difficult situation when the vineyard's there and someone puts the chalets in, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't think they should put them in, or else if the chalets are there, the vineyard shouldn't be allowed to go there. It was a classic case in Pemberton or Manjimup, I've forgotten which one, where someone had a vineyard and someone wanted to build a house, and they told him that he had to pull out so many rows of his vineyard so this man could build a house. It was ordered. I mean, that's absurd. But, I mean, the two don't really go together from the point of view of tourists. I mean, if they're going to be, you're spraying always, as soon as it's light you're up spraying, and that makes one heck of a din. I mean, you can hear it miles away.
And tourists usually like a sleep in or something.
So they're not really compatible close together. I haven't read the Lewin Naturalist Ridge thing. Have you seen it?
I saw it today.
Yeah, I must have a good look and see what they've got to say. I've got a copy.
And a lot of agricultural land's now being cleared, isn't it, for development?
Yes. Yes, well, I mean, I suppose they've got to accommodate the people who come down, but I can't see why they can't have them in cluster village type things, really. That seems to me to be the most sensible. I mean, Vass or Carbonup or Carradale, or there's a lot of places. Carradale, it could be quite attractive, really. A lot of places all the way down Bustle Highway that would be suitable. That would be the way I'd think to go, really. I mean, it's only 5 or 10 minutes to everywhere.
Now, you have a big wine tasting here quite often, don't you?
Once a year we have an international Chardonnay tasting of all the best Chardonnays from around the world, in October, usually.
So what that entail, how many different wines would you have?
We usually have about 20 or 21 and have them in brackets of 7, and then, have cheese and go outside in between.
And people try to give their mark of which one they like.
Yes, and then we take them away before we unmask them, and then get someone who's good on computers to assess them. I think Lewin, except one year, one of the Bartard Montrachets from France came top, but otherwise Lewin always comes top. And people grumble about Lewin's price, but the French ones cost us $280 a bottle half the time.
And people still buy it.
Yes.
Now today there's a lot more information available, isn't there, to people with TAFE and agriculture.
Oh yes, there's very good advice available, really. And the local association, Doug Crapsley from Evans and Tate's done a wonderful job, really, with the viticultural side of it. And he's a very nice person. He'll help anyone who wants help. Now
the increased interest in the wine, there's a big boom in land prices now, isn't there?
Yes, that's one of the disadvantages of it, really, because it means with your agricultural land you're paying ridiculous rates. And your bush too, the bush is ridiculous rates. There should be some sort of re-evaluation, I think, because people who have bush blocks can't clear them. That phone never stops ringing. And they can't clear them, and they still have to pay the same rates as people who are who've got farms or have got vineyards. I suppose they'll get round to it.
Now the big acreage planted at the moment in this area and Western Australia, because they're looking towards a big export market now, aren't they?
Yes.
Or hopefully.
I think, it's a pity that they haven't, the Wine and Brandy Corporation or whoever, Wine Export Council, should have done a spent some money doing a survey on what's happening in the rest of the world. I think they're pie-eyed the way they're looking at things. They keep boosting it, but they forget that Chile is now coming up in a big way. All the French companies and the big American companies like Mondavis and people are all planting huge tracts down in Chile. And I mean, all the Eastern European countries like Bulgaria and Hungary and places, they're not fools. We've got Australian winemakers over there showing them how to make wine. Their wines are all improving, you know, and South Africa, we can't compete with South Africa. I mean, they're on their wages. I had this man in the other day, they're all coming over here all the time because we beat them at their wine challenge they had. So it was coming in. And this man said, I was saying, you know, you're lucky because we have such high wages that our costs, we can never, high wages and taxation, and we can never ever compete with you. We can only compete with quality. Anyway, he said, oh no, our wages are going up. He said, I had to pay $15 a day. I said, oh my goodness. And I said, how many workers? He said, oh, that's 15 people. 15 people, $15. I nearly died. I thought, I pay that for 1 hour for one person.
Really don't have much idea of
No, none at all. But he said their wages had gone up. You know, it's getting quite expensive. Poor man.
I've just about finished, Mrs. Cullen. What do you think the future predictions for this area are?
Well, I think as long as they keep quality, and I keep stressing this and I'll bore you silly, as long as they keep quality, there's always a need for good quality of anything in the world. I think while they do that, there'll be an increasing demand for wine from this area. I can't see it any other way, really. But I am nervous about entrepreneurs coming in and buying up huge tracts and planting huge tracts.